My name is Caleb Vance, and I'm 31 years old. For most of my life, I've lived here in Aurora, Colorado, with the jagged line of the Rockies always watching over me from the west. There's a certain kind of peace you find in a place like this, a quiet rhythm to life that I've always appreciated. My world for the last 7 years has been the Wash and Shine, a car wash just off of Interstate 225. It's not a glamorous job, but it's an honest one, and I'm good at it. I find a deep, almost meditative satisfaction in taking a car caked in road, grime, and Colorado dust and transforming it into something gleaming and pristine. There's an art to it, a sequence of soaps and waxes and high-powered air that, when done right, is like magic. I love the smell of cherry-scented soap mixing with the hot, dry air. I love the roar of the blowers and the satisfying hum of the vacuum stations. I'm the guy who notices the little things, the spot of tar on a fender, the smudge on the inside of a windshield that everyone else misses. It's my little kingdom of clean, and I take pride in it. My life was predictable, stable, and for the most part I was content. But a shadow had fallen over my kingdom, and his name was Trevor. Trevor wasn't just a coworker. He was a keyholder, which meant he had a little bit of authority, and he wielded it like a cudgel. He was 29 but carried himself with the unearned arrogance of someone who thinks the world owes him everything. He'd been with the company for 5 years, but what most people didn't know or chose to forget was that he used to be a general manager at another location. He'd been demoted. Our old assistant general manager, a good guy named Mark who moved on to a better job, had told me the story in confidence one slow afternoon. Mark had shown me the public records on his phone. Trevor had stalking charges filed against him by an ex-girlfriend. He was on probation. The news hit me like a physical blow. I looked over at Trevor, who was lazily wiping down a counter, and I felt a chill crawl up my spine. He had always given me a weird vibe, but this was different. This was concrete. This was dangerous. After that day, I started watching him, really watching him, and what I saw turned my stomach. Trevor treated every attractive woman who came to the car wash not as a customer, but as prey. My other coworkers were no angels. They'd make dumb, locker room comments amongst themselves about customers, but it was usually lazy and uninspired. Trevor was on another level entirely. He was a hunter. He would see a car pull in, driven by a woman he deemed worthy of his attention, and his whole demeanor would shift. He'd puff out his chest, slick back his hair, and find any reason to interact with her. Our general manager, Frank, was a decent man at his core, but he was completely conflict-averse. He was a ship captain who was terrified of storms. He'd had conversations with Trevor, plenty of them. I'd overheard them myself. "Trevor, you need to leave the customers alone. Trevor, that's not appropriate." Trevor were getting complaints. But they were just words, empty warnings with no teeth. Frank would never write him up, never suspend him, never take the kind of action that would actually mean something. So Trevor would just nod, say, "I understand," and go right back to his predatory routine the second Frank's back was turned. It made my blood boil. The injustice of it was a constant, low-grade hum in the back of my mind. This guy, this creep with a criminal record for harassment, was allowed to continue his behavior without any real consequences, all while I and everyone else had to stand by and watch. He seemed to operate under the delusion that every woman he spoke to was secretly begging for his attention. One time, I heard him ask a customer, a young mother with a baby seat in the back of her minivan, if she wanted to have a kid with him. He said it with a greasy smile, as if it were the most charming pickup line ever conceived. The woman just stared at him, horrified, before speeding out of the parking lot, leaving her car half-dried. Frank had a talk with him about that one, too. A very serious, stern-faced talk that resulted in absolutely nothing. The problem for me was personal. I have a younger sister, Maya. She's 22, smart, funny, and just starting her life. Every time I saw Trevor zero in on a young woman, I saw Maya. I saw her trusting nature, her kindness, and I imagined someone like Trevor sinking his claws into her. The thought filled me with a cold, protective rage. I felt a responsibility to do something, but I was just an employee. What could I do? The situation was a pressure cooker, and I could feel the steam building inside me with nowhere to go. My dissatisfaction wasn't just about Trevor. It was about the broken system that allowed him to thrive. It was about Frank's weakness. It was about the unspoken rule that we should all just look the other way. My world of clean cars and quiet satisfaction was being fouled by this one person, and the stain was spreading. Something had to be done. I just didn't know what. My first attempt to solve the problem was to try and go through the proper channels. I thought maybe if Frank understands the severity, if he sees it from a different perspective, he'll finally act. One Tuesday, a woman came through in a nice sedan. She was a professional, dressed in a business suit, clearly on her lunch break. Trevor cornered her at the vacuum station, leaning against her car, preventing her from leaving. I was close enough to hear his side of the conversation. He was commenting on her dress, telling her how good she looked in it, asking her where she worked, if she was single. His questions were getting more and more personal, his voice lower and more intimate. The woman's body language was screaming. She was clutching her purse to her chest, looking around for any escape, giving one-word answers. It was painful to watch. I finally walked over with a detailing bottle and a cloth. "Excuse me, Trevor," I said, keeping my voice level. "Frank needs you inside to check the chemical levels." Trevor shot me a look of pure venom, but he couldn't refuse a direct, work-related order in front of a customer. He straightened up and stalked off toward the building. The woman gave me a look of profound gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking slightly. She quickly got in her car and left. That was my opening. I went straight into Frank's small, cluttered office. "Frank, we need to talk about Trevor," I started. I recounted the incident I had just witnessed, and several others I had seen over the past few weeks. I laid it all out, the pattern of harassment, the discomfort of the customers, the potential liability for the company. Frank just sat there, rubbing his temples, looking tired. "I know, Caleb, I know," he sighed. "He's a good worker when he's focused, you know. He gets the cars through fast." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Frank, that doesn't matter. He's harassing people." That woman was genuinely scared. One of these days, someone is going to do more than just drive away angry. They're going to call corporate or worse, the police. Frank flinched at the word police. Okay, I'll have another talk with him, a really serious one this time. I'll lay down the law." It was the same old story. My attempt had failed. The problem wasn't just getting worse. My intervention had made Trevor see me as an enemy. For the next week, he was passive-aggressive, intentionally leaving me the dirtiest jobs, misplacing my tools, making snide comments just loud enough for me to hear. The atmosphere at the car wash became thick with tension. My second attempt was riskier. I knew that words were not enough for Frank. He needed something he couldn't ignore. The next time Trevor started his routine, this time with a college-aged girl, I discreetly pulled out my phone and started a voice recording. I stood nearby, pretending to organize the microfiber towels, and caught the whole disgusting exchange. Trevor was bragging about his position as a keyholder, implying he could get her free car washes, and then he asked for her social media handle, telling her he'd slide into her direct messages later. It was damning. Armed with my evidence, I went back to Frank's office and closed the door. "Frank, you need to listen to this," I said, and I played the recording. As my phone filled the small office with Trevor's slimy voice, I saw a flicker of something in Frank's eyes. It wasn't anger or resolve. It was fear. He looked at me, his face pale. "Caleb, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice a panicked whisper. "You can't record people without their consent. You could get in serious trouble for this. The company could get in trouble. Delete that right now." He was more scared of my evidence than he was of Trevor's behavior. "But Frank, this is proof." I argued. "This is exactly what I've been talking about." "I don't care," he snapped, his voice rising. "Get rid of it. If the district manager finds out you're secretly recording people on the property, it'll be your job on the line, not his. Do you understand me? Drop it. This is your final warning." I stood there, stunned into silence. I had tried to do the right thing, to provide undeniable proof, and in doing so, I had not only failed but had made things catastrophically worse. Now my own job was being threatened. I had become the problem. I walked out of his office feeling utterly defeated. Trevor saw the look on my face and gave me a triumphant smirk. He knew he was untouchable. That was my lowest point. I felt completely powerless. The system was designed to protect itself, not the people it was supposed to serve. Frank was a coward, Trevor was a predator, and I was the one who was going to get fired for trying to stop it. I went home that night and sat in my quiet apartment, the distant hum of the city a poor substitute for the peace I used to feel. I thought about quitting. I thought about just giving up and letting the rot consume the place I had once taken so much pride in. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. All my efforts had been for nothing. In fact, they had backfired spectacularly. All hope seemed lost, and Trevor, the smiling, untouchable monster, had won. I spent the next day in a fog of resentment and frustration. I went through the motions at work, my usual satisfaction replaced with a bitter taste in my mouth. Every time I saw Trevor swaggering around the lot, my hands clenched into fists. I knew I couldn't let it go. Quitting would be letting him win. Doing nothing would make me complicit. The memory of Frank's panicked face, his fear of my evidence, played over and over in my head. He wasn't afraid of Trevor's actions. He was afraid of them being exposed. That's when the idea began to form. A tiny, dangerous seed planted in the barren ground of my despair. If the system from the inside was broken, then maybe I needed to attack it from the outside. The turning point came on a Thursday afternoon. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, and business was steady. A cherry-red convertible pulled into the greeting station. The driver was a young woman, probably no older than 20, with bright eyes and a friendly smile. She looked like she didn't have a care in the world. I felt a familiar knot of dread in my stomach. She was exactly Trevor's type. I greeted her politely, explaining the different wash packages. "The ultimate shine should do the trick for you," I said, trying to get the transaction done as quickly as possible. But it was too late. Like a shark smelling blood in the water, Trevor materialized beside me. "Hey there, how's your day going?" he asked, flashing his practiced, phony smile at her. He leaned against the terminal, making small talk about the beautiful weather, his eyes shamelessly roaming over her. I could see the girl's friendly demeanor tight and her smile becoming forced. I quickly finished the sale and scanned her pass. As she pulled forward into the wash tunnel, Trevor turned and started walking toward the drying area at the other end, a predatory gleam in his eye. He was going to intercept her. Frank, who was outside for a moment, saw it too. "Trevor," he called out, his voice sharper than usual. "Don't go talk to her, just stay here and manage the line." Trevor paused, looked back at Frank, and gave a little nod. But the moment Frank turned to go back to his office for his break, Trevor continued on his path, disappearing into the parking lot to wait for his victim to emerge from the tunnel. That was it. That was the final straw, the blatant, absolute defiance. 10 minutes later, I was inside folding towels when I overheard Trevor in the break room, bragging to one of the other guys. He was crowing about how he'd gotten the girl's Instagram handle. He described her body in crude, objectifying detail, listing the disgusting things he wanted to do with her. The rage that had been simmering inside me for months finally boiled over. It was no longer a hot, angry rage, but a cold, clear, and focused one. I knew exactly what I had to do. Revenge was coming. Our company is obsessed with its online reputation. Every single Google review, good or bad, is automatically emailed to the general manager and the district manager. We check them constantly. Frank is particularly paranoid about one-star reviews. They are his kryptonite. I waited until the lunch rush was over and the break room was empty. I took out my phone. My heart was pounding in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I opened an incognito browser tab and created a new email account. I used a generic female name, something plausible like Jessica Miller. I found a stock photo of a friendly-looking anonymous young woman and set it as the profile picture. Then I went to the Car Wash Google page. I selected 1 star. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I started to type, channeling all of my pent-up anger, all of my frustration with Trevor, with Frank, with the entire broken system. I wrote from the perspective of that girl in the red convertible. I described how the keyholder had made her feel uncomfortable at the pay station, how he had then cornered her in the parking lot, refusing to leave her alone. I wrote about how he'd pestered her for her personal information, how his comments had made her feel unsafe and objectified. I let all the ugliness I had witnessed over the months pour out onto the screen, embellishing details, twisting a dozen true stories into one perfect, believable nightmare. When I was done, the review was raw, angry, and a little too articulate. It sounded like me. So I did something clever. I copied the entire text and pasted it into one of those artificial intelligence chat programs. I typed in a simple command: "Rewrite this to sound like it was written by a 20-year-old college student who is very upset." The program spit back a revised version in seconds. It was perfect. It had added slang, shortened some sentences, and changed the tone just enough to be flawlessly authentic. It was the voice of a genuinely distressed young woman. I took a deep breath, read it one last time, and hit post. The finality of the action was terrifying and exhilarating. There was no going back. I walked out of the break room and resumed my work, my mind electric with anticipation. A few minutes later, I saw Frank in his office through the glass window. He was on his break, scrolling through his phone. Suddenly, he froze. I watched as his face went slack with shock. He shook his head slowly, then his hand flew up to cover his mouth. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. A moment later, he walked out of his office, his face ashen. He walked right up to me, holding his phone out. "Caleb," he said, his voice trembling. "Check the review Trevor got." I feigned surprise, taking the phone and reading the words that I had crafted only minutes before. I shook my head. "Wow," I said, handing it back. That's really bad." The news spread through the car wash like wildfire. One by one, the other coworkers read the review, and to a man, they all said the same thing in one form or another. He had it coming. I'm not surprised. It was only a matter of time. Because Trevor had been so consistently awful to so many women for so long, the review was 100% believable. There was no reason for anyone to question its authenticity. It fit his character perfectly. Trevor himself was oblivious until Frank called him into the office. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw Trevor's face turn from arrogant to panicked. He came storming out, shouting that the girl was lying, that he had never done anything wrong. But his denials were hollow. Everyone had seen him follow her. Everyone had heard him brag. His own actions had built the foundation for his own destruction. An hour later, our district manager, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies, called Frank's phone. After another long, closed-door conversation, Trevor was told to hand over his keys and go home. He was suspended without pay until further notice. As I was closing up that evening, Ms. Davies called the shop's main line and asked to speak to me. My blood ran cold. Did she know? She asked me in a very calm and professional voice if I had witnessed any inappropriate behavior from Trevor. I told her the truth, recounting the incident with the woman in the business suit and the one with the young mother. I left out the recording, of course. I just told her what I saw. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Thank you for your honesty, Caleb," she finally said. "Between your statement and the customer's review, we have a clear picture. I can't discuss employee matters in detail, but let's just say it's about 99.9% certain that his employment is being terminated pending the official investigation." After I hung up, a wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. I had done it. I had taken on the monster, and I had won. He was gone. I don't feel a shred of guilt. He can end up on the streets for all I care. He was a terrible human being with gut-wrenching morals, a blight on an otherwise decent place. My little act of digital vengeance had accomplished what months of complaints and pleas could not. The next day, the car wash was different. It was quieter. The tension was gone. The air itself felt cleaner. Frank was more subdued, but also more engaged. It was as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders, too. He even started helping with the drying towels, something he hadn't done in years. The wash and shine started to feel like my kingdom again. I had risked everything, and in the end my plan had not just succeeded, it had cleansed the entire workplace. I feel a quiet sense of satisfaction when I come to work now. There's a new keyholder, a professional woman in her 40s who treats everyone with respect. The atmosphere is peaceful. Sometimes I see a young woman pull in, smiling and relaxed, getting her car washed without a single worry, and I know I did the right thing. I crossed a line, yes. I fabricated a story and potentially ruined a man's career, but I believe it was a necessary evil. I took the poison out. Karma, I've learned, is not always a passive force. Sometimes it needs a little help.